Welcome back to Novel Nest Audio. In the previous episode, Klein Moretti found himself standing at a crossroads. After uncovering dangerous secrets surrounding the mysterious Antigonus notebook, he was finally given a choice: walk away from the unknown or step into it. Klein chose the latter. By drinking the potion that would turn him into a beyonder, he left the ordinary world behind and stepped onto a path filled with mystery, danger, and knowledge few people in the world truly understand. But becoming a beyonder is only the beginning, because once you enter this hidden world, there is no turning back. And our story continues right from that moment. Episode 7. The Path of a Beyonder. Let us begin. Chapter 31. The Elixir of Vision. Dunsmith fixed Klein with a silent stare. His gray eyes remained locked on Klein's face for nearly a full minute, the weight of the moment pressing down on the quiet room. The captain finally spoke, his tone flat but serious. Once the potion enters your body, there is no turning back. Regret will no longer matter. Klein did not lower his gaze. A faint smile appeared on his face as he accepted the warning. Deep inside, he had already weighed the risks and the urgency pushing him forward. Dunn warns him about the consequences of what lies ahead. Klein answers with quiet determination. I understand, but the voice inside me is clear. I trust it. He had already dismissed several possible paths. The abilities of the sleepless and the spectator did not suit the situation he faced. Even the corpse collector pathway had been crossed out after careful thought. Only two realistic choices remained in his mind: mystery prior or seer. With little reliable knowledge about either path, Klein relied on fragments of clues he had gathered earlier. A line from an old emperor's diary lingered in his thoughts, subtly pushing his decision in one direction. If all potions of the same sequence carried equal danger, then hesitation offered no advantage. Acting quickly was better than waiting endlessly for perfect information that might never come. Dunn finally stood and placed his halved top hat back on his head. With a simple motion, he gestured toward the exit. Dunn gave a brief instruction. Come with me, we're going downstairs. Klein gave a polite bow before following. Their footsteps echoed through the stairwell as they descended into the silent underground passage. The air below was strangely fresh despite the depth, though a cold draft occasionally slipped through the corridors. Klein felt an uneasy tension creeping into his chest. Klein asked a question to break the silence. You mentioned earlier that drinking the potion doesn't grant knowledge directly. If that's the case, where did the foundation of mysticism come from? Dunn glanced at him briefly. The darkness in his eyes seemed deeper in the dim light. Dunn explains the origins of mystical knowledge. Some of it came from experimentation, people risking their lives to learn and record results. Some knowledge was said to be granted by the gods, and some came from listening to the dangerous murmurs that ordinary people cannot hear. Those whispers were not always meaningless madness. Occasionally they revealed fragments of hidden truths about the mystical world. But anyone who listened to them for too long inevitably lost themselves. Madness or corruption always followed. Dunn adds a final remark. The notebooks left behind by those unfortunate souls are considered valuable research today. Klein felt a chill run down his spine. The idea sounded disturbingly similar to human experimentation. Thence, they reached an underground intersection. Instead of heading toward the heavily guarded gate or the archives, Dunn turned toward another passage that led closer to the cathedral above. Halfway down the corridor, he stopped and pressed something hidden in the wall. A concealed door silently opened. Dunn revealed the room behind the secret door. This is the alchemy room used by our team. He explained that old Neil would soon retrieve the seer potion formula and its ingredients from inside the secured storage. Fortunately, the necessary materials were still available. Dunn gives a simple instruction. Wait here and watch how the potion is made, and don't touch anything inside. Most items here are either extremely dangerous or extremely expensive. Then, Dunn suddenly remembered something. He turned back again. Dunn clarifies Klein's status. For now, you won't officially join the team. You'll remain civilian staff. Continue your previous duties and study mysticism with Old Neil. Klein nodded. Though he felt a slight disappointment about his salary, the decision made sense. Without training, joining dangerous missions would almost guarantee his death. Before leaving, Dunn delivered one more warning. Dunn informs Klein about recent discoveries. The secret order might not trouble you soon. They're still unsure how important the notebook truly is, but don't become careless. Their investigation had also uncovered something else. The organization still preserves strange traditions linked to an ancient empire and corrupted nobles of the past. Klein exhaled slowly after hearing the news. The danger surrounding him was another reason he could not afford to delay becoming a Beyonder. Once Dunn finally left without returning again, Klein stepped into the alchemy room alone. Long tables filled the chamber, covered with test tubes, scales, crucibles, and other instruments. It resembled a chemistry laboratory from another era. Yet, scattered among the scientific tools were objects that belonged to a very different world. Mystical emblems, a large cauldron, and a crystal ball that shimmered faintly under dim light. Klein looked around with fascination, but kept his hands firmly to himself. Not long after, footsteps approached the room. Old Neil enters carrying a small silver chest. So, you chose the seer pathway after all. Interesting. The old man studied Klein with his reddish, slightly clouded eyes before nodding approvingly. Old Neil gives him instructions. Light the gas lamps and shut the door. We'll begin. Klein quickly followed the instructions, illuminating the room with several dim lamps before sealing the door behind them. Old Neil cleaned the black cauldron with a bundle of peculiar branches before beginning his explanation. Old Neil explains potion preparation. For potions at lower sequences, the process is actually simple. Follow the formula precisely, add the ingredients in order, and mix them. Klein blinked in disbelief. Klein responds skeptically. That's all? Old Neil smiled and traced a quick sacred gesture over his chest. Old Neil offers a possible explanation. Perhaps it's simply a blessing of the gods. The old man opened the silver chest and pulled out a piece of ancient goatskin parchment covered in ink the color of dried blood. Klein recognized the language instantly. The formula was written in Hermes, a script he could read with ease. Old Neil began preparing the ingredients step by step. Distilled water was poured into the cauldron first. Next came 13 drops of night vanilla extract. A faint fragrance spread through the air, calming Klein's nerves almost instantly. 7 leaves of gold mint followed, releasing a sharp and refreshing scent as they touched the liquid. Then came 3 drops of poison hemlock, an infamous ingredient for its deadly effects if used improperly. 9 grams of dragon blood grass were measured precisely before being stirred into the mixture. Old Neil finally moved to the more dangerous components. Old Neil explains the next ingredient. This is blood from a lavos squid, an unusual creature touched by extraordinary forces. The blood inside the test tube glowed a soft sky blue color. Tiny bubbles formed within it as if it were alive. When the blood entered the cauldron, the liquid began to bubble softly. The surrounding light shifted to a faint blue glow. For a moment, Klein felt something impossible to describe, a strange familiarity, like the comforting silence of the womb. The last ingredient was a gelatin-like crystal known as stellar aqua. Old Neil added the final material. This crystal is usually used for divination tools. Today, we'll need 50 grams. The moment the crystal entered the cauldron, pale fog burst outward. Within the mist, Klein thought he saw countless stars stretching across an endless void. And somewhere beyond that cosmic haze, it felt as though something unseen had noticed him. A few seconds later, the fog faded. Old Neil scooped a thick, dark blue liquid from the cauldron and poured it carefully into an opaque cup. Not a single drop remained behind. Old Neil presents the result. It's ready, your seer potion.
The strange liquid rested quietly in the cup, thick and dark beneath the dim lamplight. The air in the alchemy room grew still, and in that silence, the moment of transformation waited patiently.
Chapter 32. Awakening the Spirit Sight. Klein stared at the thick, dark blue substance inside the opaque cup. The potion's texture was strange, neither fully liquid nor fully solid. A faint, almost dreamlike fragrance drifted upward. His throat tightened slightly as he prepared himself. "Do I simply drink it like this? There's no ritual, prayer, or special preparation beforehand?" Old Neil responds with deliberate exaggeration. "Of course there is. First, you should pour yourself a glass of Intis grape wine, light a cigar, whistle a cheerful tune, dance a lively court dance, and then play a round of cards." Klein stared at him, speechless. "I'm only saying if you're feeling nervous." The corners of Klein's mouth twitched. For a moment, he even felt the urge to draw his revolver. Instead, he set aside his cane and carefully lifted the cup. The potion's scent remained faint and mysterious as he raised it toward his lips. Old Neil speaks while washing his hands nearby. "Don't hesitate. The longer you delay, the more fear will root. That only makes absorbing the potion harder." Klein inhaled deeply. Like a child forcing down bitter medicine, he pinched his nose and tipped the cup back. The thick liquid slid smoothly into his mouth, cool and oddly refreshing. It flowed down his throat and settled in his stomach. Almost immediately, strange sensations spread through his body. The potion seemed to stretch into countless icy threads that reached every cell. Klein's vision blurred violently. Colors intensified beyond normal limits. Reds burned brighter, blues deepened, and darkness swallowed everything else. He'd experienced something similar once before, during a spiritual investigation. His mind floated lightly, yet remained strangely clear. It felt as though he had become a drifting survivor, lost in a silent ocean. Gradually, the chaos resolved into a hazy gray fog. Strange, translucent shapes drifted around him, forms that seemed both present and non-existent. Deep within the fog shimmered clusters of light in different colors, each pulsing faintly with hidden meaning. Klein instinctively looked downward. There he saw his own body still standing in the alchemy room, trembling violently. The realization struck him instantly. His consciousness plunged downward and merged with his body once more. The fog shattered, colors snapped back to normal. Klein's head throbbed violently, as if something inside it were being torn apart. Multiple afterimages overlapped before his eyes. At the same time, faint whispers echoed in his ears. Hornasis phlegrea, hornasis phlegrea. Sharp pain stabbed through his forehead. A wild urge to destroy something surged within him. "Is your vision behaving strangely, and are you hearing sounds you never noticed before?" "Yes, Mr. Neil. What should I do?" Old Neil chuckled softly. "The potion's power is leaking because you haven't learned to control it yet. Focus on imagining something simple, an ordinary object." Klein immediately obeyed. In his mind, he pictured his black silk top hat. He imagined its shape, texture, and the familiar feeling of holding it. Control its outline. Does the discomfort lessen? Klein poured his attention into the mental image. The chaotic whispers faded into distant murmurs before disappearing completely. The overlapping images merged back into a single clear vision. "It's much better now." His breathing steadied, and the violent sensations finally subsided. Klein looked down at himself and tested his limbs. "So, did it work? Have I become a seer?" Old Neil responds by handing him a reflective mercury plate. "Take a look at your eyes." Klein examined his reflection carefully. At first glance, nothing seemed different except the sweat covering his face. But when he focused on his pupils, he noticed a change. The brown color of his eyes had deepened dramatically, becoming almost pitch black, like a night sky without moonlight. Old Neil explains the change. That's a visible sign of the potion's effect. Once you learn how to concentrate your powers properly, your eyes will return to normal. Old Neil extended his hand. Old Neil offers congratulations. Welcome, you are now a beyonder, a seer. Klein responds gratefully. Thank you. Mr. Neil, when can I begin learning cogitation? Old Neil answers immediately. You can start right now. What you just did, imagining an object and focusing your thoughts, that's the first step. Klein closed his eyes again and pictured the top hat once more. This time, concentration came easily. Random thoughts vanished quickly. Old Neil gives further instruction. Now empty your mind further. Replace the object with something that doesn't exist in this world. Only then can you reach true cogitation. Klein tried imagining an object from his previous life, a military missile he once saw on television. But no matter how hard he tried, the image failed to deepen his concentration, so he changed his approach. He imagined glowing spheres of light gathering together into a fantastical formation. Gradually, his thoughts drifted into a calm and ethereal state. The fog, lights, and strange imagery from earlier appeared again. Klein extended his awareness carefully and observed them in silence. Old Neil commented approvingly. Excellent. You entered cogitation smoothly, just slightly slower than I did when I first tried. Slightly. Old Neil began preparing the next lesson. Old Neil announces the next ability. Now I'll teach you one of the most useful skills in mysticism, spirit vision. He extinguished several gas lamps while opening the door slightly, leaving the room dim but not completely dark. Klein followed every instruction carefully. Old Neil explains the process. Raise your hands in front of your eyes. Keep your index fingers close together, but don't let them touch. Klein lifted his hands and adjusted them carefully. Old Neil continues. Focus your gaze on a point behind your fingers. Slowly move them while keeping them in your sight. Klein followed the instructions again and again. Suddenly, a faint fiery red glow appeared between his fingertips. I see a color. That's correct. What you're seeing is your aura. That's the beginning of spirit vision. Klein repeated the movement several more times until the glow stabilized. Old Neil began explaining the deeper theory behind what he was seeing. He described how the human being possessed several invisible layers beyond the physical body. At the core existed the spirit body, the source of every person's spirituality. Outside it was the astral projection, which allowed communication with the spirit world and distant realms. Through this projection, mystical visions and divinations could occur. Beyond that lay the body of heart and mind, representing intellect, reasoning, and emotional states. The outermost layer was the ether body, reflecting vitality and physical condition. The colored aura Klein saw belonged to this ether body. Its brightness, thickness, and color could reveal a person's health and emotional state. Old Neil continued explaining the meaning behind different colors. Red for motion and passion, blue for calm thinking, green for regulation, and white for overall health. Klein memorized the information carefully while maintaining his spirit vision. Good. Now try looking at other things. Klein slowly turned his gaze toward Old Neil. Different colored lights surrounded the old man's body. The purple light around his head shone brightly, while the red aura around his limbs appeared dimmer. Klein silently concluded that age was beginning to show. Only then did he truly feel the reality of his transformation. He had stepped into the world of beyonders. But in the next instant, Klein froze.
Behind old Neil, in the empty darkness, floated a pair of cold and emotionless eyes. The translucent eyes had no eyebrows and stared directly at both of them. "There's a pair of eyes behind you." Old Neil stiffened for a moment before forcing a smile. "Just ignore them." The dim alchemy room returned to silence. Yet the memory of those unseen eyes lingered in the darkness, and something unseen continued watching.
Chapter 33. The Hidden Switch. The instant old Neil finished speaking, the strange pair of eyes floating behind him disappeared. The darkness swallowed them completely. Even while using spirit vision, Klein could no longer detect any trace of their presence. Old Neil explains casually, "That sort of thing happens with ritualistic magic." Klein felt both relief and fascination. The ability he had just awakened felt almost like gaining a mysterious new sense. With excitement, he began looking around the alchemy room again, carefully examining everything with his spirit vision. The outlines of ordinary objects, tables, glass tubes, measuring scales, and cabinets looked exactly the same as before. None of them emitted light or color. Klein muttered quietly to himself, realizing something. So, objects without life don't have spirituality? But when his gaze landed on the silver chest that held the potion ingredients, a burst of colors suddenly appeared. The glow was vibrant, sky-blue brilliance, star-like sparkles, and deep crimson flashes. Even if the creature that produced the material is already dead, its essence still remains active? It's better to call it residual spirituality. That leftover energy is essential when making potions. He added that the same lingering spirituality was also one of the reasons Beyonders sometimes lost control. Old Neil chuckled as he recalled an example. One potion recipe requires a dried mature frog with black spots. Anyone willing to swallow that must be very brave. Klein imagined it for a moment and immediately felt uneasy. He shifted his gaze towards the darker corners of the room, hoping to see wandering spirits or strange entities. But there was nothing. Isn't the spirit world supposed to exist everywhere? Old Neil replied bluntly, "Repeat after me. This is the headquarters of the Nighthawks, located beneath the church. With so many Beyonders around, do you think we would allow spirits to roam freely here?" He also pointed out that the spirit world and wandering spirits were not exactly the same thing. Klein coughed awkwardly and turned his head aside. "I understand." But suddenly, Klein felt a sharp twitch between his brows. At the edge of the dim light near the doorway, he thought he saw a figure standing silently. The figure looked vaguely human, yet its aura blended perfectly with the darkness, making it difficult to distinguish. A stabbing sensation shot through his forehead. His vision blurred for a moment. When he focused again, the figure had vanished. Klein turned towards old Neil. "The area between my brows keeps twitching. It feels uncomfortable." Old Neil responded cheerfully. "That's perfectly normal for a new Beyonder." He explained that spirit vision placed heavy strain on the spirit body. Overuse could cause headaches, oversensitivity, or even brief hallucinations. Additionally, the unfamiliar sights could affect a person's emotions. Fortunately, repeated practice would eventually make these symptoms fade. "Then how do I turn spirit vision off?" Old Neil answered patiently. "Just like earlier, focus your thoughts on something simple and pull your attention away. Close your eyes, control your spirituality, and repeatedly tell yourself that the vision is ending." Old Neil then mentioned a more convenient technique. "With practice, you can create a personal switch. A small action, like tapping your forehead twice, can activate spirit vision. Repeat the action again, and the vision will stop." Klein considered the idea carefully. He decided to use the same method, 2 taps on his glabella. 1 tap might be accidental, and 3 taps could waste precious time during danger.
Klein entered cogitation again. Under Old Neil's guidance, he repeatedly practiced creating the mental trigger. Finally, the switch was complete. He tapped his glabella twice. Immediately, colorful auras filled his sight. 2 more taps, and everything returned to normal. I finally managed it. Only then did he realize how tired he felt. His body felt drained, as if he had stayed up for several nights. We aren't part of the sleepless pathway. After heavy practice with spirit vision, you'll need proper rest. Old Neil told Klein to take a walk later near Iron Cross Street to search for clues about the mysterious notebook. Tomorrow, I'll continue teaching you more about mysticism. Understood. Klein picked up his cane and left the alchemy room. As he climbed the staircase, Dunn Smith suddenly appeared behind him. Old Neil says you adapted very well. You even managed to use spirit vision before learning proper cogitation. It might simply be an advantage of the seer pathway. Dunn paused for a moment before offering a serious reminder. Remember this, curiosity kills more than cats. If you hear whispers that should not be heard or see things that remain unseen, do not investigate. Klein nodded quietly. He understood exactly what Dunn meant. Losing control was always a danger for Beyonders. After leaving the company office, Klein took a carriage back to Daffodil Street. He nearly fell asleep during the ride. When he arrived home, the house was empty. Benson had gone to work, and Melissa had already left for school. Klein climbed the stairs without hesitation. The moment his head touched the pillow, he fell into deep sleep. When he opened his eyes again, sunlight flooded the room. For a moment, panic struck him. Did I miss the gathering? He checked his pocket watch and relaxed. It was only slightly past noon. The gathering would begin at 3. Klein tested his spirit vision again with 2 taps on his forehead. Seeing that everything looked normal, he turned the ability off. He boiled water, brewed weak tea, and ate simple bread with butter. Afterwards, he reviewed historical documents and the previous owner's diary. Minutes slowly turned into hours. Finally, the clock approached 3. Klein closed his books, shut the curtains, and locked the bedroom door. He briefly activated spirit vision to confirm nothing unusual was hiding in the room. Then he began walking 4 steps in a counterclockwise square. Soft Chinese words left his lips. Soon the familiar fog appeared. Dark red stars shimmered within the gray haze. 2 of them felt strangely connected to him. Klein gazed at his blurred form and muttered thoughtfully. So this is what Old Neil meant by astral projection. Remaining calm, he once again reshaped the mysterious palace hidden within the fog. The enormous bronze table appeared beneath a domed ceiling. 22 towering chairs surrounded it, each marked by a different constellation. Klein walked to the seat of honor. Extending his hand, he touched 2 deep red stars. A mystical link, and once again the unusual gathering began to awaken. In the endless gray fog, silent stars waited, and the unseen world slowly turned its gaze toward him.
Chapter 34. The Price Paid in Advance. In a windowless underground chamber, a burly man sat alone beside a long table cluttered with instruments and parchment notes. A half-burned candle flickered weakly, its yellow flame causing shadows to sway like restless spirits. The man's dark blue hair hung loosely, resembling tangled strands of seaweed. Alger Wilson sat silently with his hands clasped, thumbs touching each other. His attention remained fixed on a sealed bottle placed beside the candle. Inside that bottle churned a black liquid that behaved strangely. The faint roar of storm winds echoed from within, as if the sea itself had been imprisoned inside the glass. At times, pale fog swirled across its surface, briefly forming shapes that looked disturbingly like eyes or mouths. Alger tilted his head slightly and glanced toward the clock hanging on the wall. The needle struck 3. Suddenly,
a tide of deep red light surged from nowhere and swallowed him entirely. Far away in Backland, sunlight poured through the tall windows of a luxurious mansion in Empressboro. Inside her elegant bedroom, Audrey Hall dismissed her dance instructor and carefully locked the door. She sat upright before her dressing table. On its surface rested a delicate goatskin notebook, opened to reveal blank pages. Beside it lay a beautiful fountain pen decorated with small rubies. Audrey tested the arrangement, making sure she could immediately write down the potion formula once the mysterious gathering ended. Audrey speaks softly to herself. I can't wait for it to begin. She inhaled slowly, trying to suppress the excitement bubbling within her chest. But the mirror in front of her no longer reflected her figure. Instead, a dark red beam erupted from her body. Above an endless sea of gray fog stood a magnificent hall, towering like a palace built for gods. Two streams of crimson light surged upward beside a long bronze table before settling into shape. From those lights emerged two indistinct figures, seated exactly where they had been during previous gatherings. Audrey, her golden hair flowing over her shoulders, looked immediately toward the seat at the head of the table. "Good afternoon, Mr. Fool." "Good afternoon, Mr. Hanged Man." The figure shrouded within thick gray mist responded with composed politeness. "Good afternoon, Miss Justice." While maintaining his mysterious demeanor, Klein lightly tapped the area between his eyebrows twice. Instantly, the world before him shifted. Through spirit vision, he could see the colorful aura surrounding both Justice and the Hanged Man. Justice's aura matched the descriptions old Neil had once explained. Her colors were vibrant and balanced, glowing with energy. Red and yellow tones dominated her emotional aura, symbols of enthusiasm, happiness, and excitement. Then Klein turned his attention to the Hanged Man. At first glance, the colors around him seemed ordinary, but upon focusing carefully, Klein noticed something unusual. Hidden in the innermost layer of Alger's aura was a deep blue shade that resembled the sea during a raging storm. It felt powerful and dangerous. Klein suspected this might be related to the Hanged Man's astral projection. If his assumption was correct, then Alger was undoubtedly a Beyonder, and quite possibly stronger than old Neil. Meanwhile, Alger completed his greeting. Audrey asks eagerly, "Mr. Hanged Man, did you receive the ghost shark blood I sent?" "Yes, and I'm very grateful. It met my expectations perfectly. I did not think you would deliver it so quickly." Audrey replies warmly, "I'm glad it helped."
Since childhood, Audrey had been fascinated by mystical knowledge. Through her social circle of nobles with similar interests, she had gained access to many strange books and artifacts. Yet none of those acquaintances had ever truly obtained supernatural power. The ghost shark blood she provided had come from her family's own vault. Since the inventory only recorded one bottle, removing a small portion would likely go unnoticed. Alger glanced briefly toward the mist-shrouded figure of the fool before turning back to Audrey. Alger begins fulfilling his promise. As agreed, I will now provide the formula for the spectator potion. Audrey responds eagerly. I'm ready. Alger first reminded her about the dangers involved. Alger warns carefully. When preparing potions, it is acceptable to use slightly less of an ingredient, but never more. Exceeding the correct amount could lead to disastrous consequences. You've heard of Beyonders losing control. Audrey nods and answers, Yes, I understand. Alger then recited the ingredients one by one. Alger lists the components. Spectator potion, sequence 9. 80 milliliters of pure water, 5 drops of autumn crocus essence, 13 grams of cow teeth painol powder, 7 petals from elf flowers,
1 mature manhal fish eyeball, and 35 milliliters of goat-horned blackfish blood. He emphasized that the final ingredients came from extraordinary sea creatures and required great caution. Audrey carefully repeated the list, committing every detail to memory. Afterward, Alger offered additional advice. Alger explains further. After drinking the potion, immediately begin practicing cogitation. By controlling your spirituality daily, you will gradually unlock the meaning hidden within the potion's name. Klein listened silently from the head of the table. When Alger mentioned the significance of a potion's name, a memory surfaced in Klein's mind. He gently tapped the table. Both Justice and the Hanged Man turned their eyes toward him. It is not about grasping power, but digesting it. It is not about discovering mysteries, but acting them out. The name of a potion is more than symbolism. It provides the key to digestion. Audrey blinked in confusion, struggling to fully understand the statement. But Alger froze completely. His lips trembled as he repeated the words softly. Digesting, acting, the key. After a long moment, Alger raised his head. Alger expresses deep thanks. Mr. Fool, your guidance is invaluable. I feel as though I've been shown an important truth. Klein maintained his mysterious expression behind the fog. Consider it an advance payment. In reality, Klein himself did not fully understand the deeper meaning of those words. He had simply repeated something he once read in Emperor Rosel's diary. Audrey studied Alger's stunned reaction carefully. It was clear that the knowledge Mr. Fool had shared was extremely valuable. Audrey asked respectfully, "Mr. Fool, is there something you would like us to do in return?" Alger adds calmly, "What task would you entrust us with?" Klein leaned slightly back in his chair. After a moment of silence, he spoke softly. "Help me collect the secret diary of Roselle, Gustave. Even a single page will suffice." The gray fog drifted silently around the bronze table. Somewhere within that endless mist, new secrets were already beginning to move.
Chapter 35. Trading Secrets. Audrey was briefly stunned by the request. Roselle Gustave's secret diary? That alone carried enormous historical weight. Yet after a moment, the surprise faded. If anyone would seek such a thing, it would naturally be someone like the mysterious Mr. Fool. Stories about Emperor Roselle were famous among nobles and mysticism enthusiasts. Some believed he once witnessed the legendary blasphemy slate. Others whispered that the mysterious tarot cards he created concealed knowledge about 22 divine pathways. Such secrets would inevitably attract the attention of powerful beyonders. Across the table, Alger Wilson frowned slightly. He had noticed something subtle. Mr. Fool had described Roselle's writings as a diary, but how could he be so certain? Roselle's writings had always been considered undecipherable symbols. Did Mr. Fool know how to interpret them? Seated at the head of the bronze table, Klein leaned back calmly and folded his hands together. "For the time being, let us treat them as a diary." The answer neither confirmed nor denied Alger's suspicions. Audrey tilted her head slightly. "I've heard that Emperor Roselle wrote those texts using strange symbols he invented. Is that true?" "Yes. Some scholars believe the symbols come from a hidden mystical language. Others think they resemble ancient hieroglyphics, but so far no one has truly deciphered them." As he spoke, Alger cast a deliberate glance toward the fog-shrouded figure of the Fool. Behind the gray mist, Klein suppressed a quiet laugh at his own thoughts.
For a moment, an absurd image crossed his mind. A sinister wizard raising his sleeve to reveal a mystical symbol created by Emperor Roselle, only for the mark to display two Chinese characters that translated roughly to something ridiculous. Of course, Klein kept such thoughts hidden behind his mysterious demeanor. Audrey soon raised a more practical question. If we cannot understand those symbols, how should we send them to you? Would we need to mail them somewhere? Klein did not answer immediately. He slowly tapped his thumbs together as he considered the problem. Then a possibility emerged in his mind. If he could reshape this mysterious palace according to his will, perhaps he could also project information here. He decided to attempt it. The fog surrounding him stirred slightly as Klein leaned forward. "Miss Justice, let us attempt a small experiment. Imagine a short passage of text and write it down with the intention of presenting it here." Before Audrey even responded, a sheet of yellowish parchment and a dark red fountain pen appeared before her on the table. She stared at them with curiosity and disbelief. Recalling something she once read, Audrey imagined a short line written by Emperor Roselle. She lifted the pen and focused her intention on projecting the words. The moment the pen touched the parchment, a sentence appeared clearly. "If winter arrives, can spring truly be far away?" "Goddess, that's incredible!"
But the excitement quickly turned into unease. "Mr. Fool, are you able to read our thoughts?" Klein shook his head slightly. "No, I merely guide the process. If you choose not to express something, nothing will appear." Audrey exhaled softly as her tension faded. The method suddenly made perfect sense. "So we simply memorize the symbols and reproduce them here?" "Yes." Alger nodded slowly from his seat. The experiment had convinced him even further of Mr. Fool's mysterious abilities. "After becoming a spectator, your memory will greatly improve." Audrey's eyes brightened with excitement. "Mr. Hanged Man, do you have any additional advice about spectators?" She then turned respectfully toward the head of the table. "Mr. Fool, I will do my best to gather pages from Emperor Rosel's diary." Klein nodded calmly. "I prefer fair exchanges. The knowledge I provided earlier equals 2 pages of the diary from each of you. If you obtain more, I will provide further compensation." Alger bowed slightly with one hand over his chest. "You are indeed generous." He then turned back toward Audrey. "A spectator must always remain a spectator." He explained that many people with this pathway often became too emotionally involved in the events they observed. But such behavior would weaken their ability. You must observe people without becoming part of their drama. Only by remaining detached can you notice their habits, their lies, and their hidden emotions. Audrey listened intently, her eyes shining with interest. "That sounds incredibly fascinating." At that moment, Klein felt a sudden spark of realization. If the spectator's requirement was to behave like an impartial observer, then perhaps every potion required a certain form of acting. To digest the seer potion, perhaps he needed to act like a true seer. While Klein pondered this idea, Alger finished explaining everything he knew. He then proposed something new. "Perhaps we should exchange information. What seems ordinary to one person might be valuable to another." Klein nodded slowly. "That sounds wonderful. Mr. Hanged Man, why don't you begin?" Alger considered for a moment before speaking. "The pirate known as Lieutenant General Duville has begun another voyage toward the eastern edge of the Soigna Sea." Audrey immediately recognized the name. "The captain of the Black Tulip?" "Yes." Klein listened silently. He knew nothing about the pirate, but he had already chosen a piece of information he could share safely. He slowly ran his fingers across the bronze table. "I have learned that the secret order recently lost a notebook belonging to the Antigonus family."
Alger repeated the name thoughtfully. Then he smiled slightly. I would be very interested to see how the Church of the Evernight Goddess reacts to that news. Klein sensed something unusual in that remark, but remained silent. Audrey asked the obvious question, why would the Church react strongly? Because the Antigonus family was destroyed by the Church of the Evernight Goddess. It happened sometime near the end of the Fourth Epoch, or perhaps the beginning of the current one. Klein's pupils tightened instantly. A cold chill spread through him. The importance of the Antigonus notebook was far greater than he had originally assumed. The Nighthawks likely wanted him to become a Beyonder, not only for protection, but also to help locate that notebook. Across the table, Audrey rested her chin on her hand as she thought. Yesterday, my etiquette instructor taught me something amusing. He showed me how to faint gracefully during social events. She giggled lightly. Then her expression grew thoughtful. After the recent failure along Balaam's eastern coast, the king and many government leaders are under enormous pressure. They're eager to change the situation. The fog drifted silently around the ancient bronze table. Within that mysterious hall, secrets continued to change hands, and somewhere beyond the gray mist, unseen forces quietly moved.
Some paths only reveal their true shape after the first step is taken. And somewhere beyond the visible world, quiet movements have already begun. We'll continue this journey in the next episode. This episode is an original retelling inspired by a popular web novel.